What's up, YouTubers? Welcome back, and welcome to another edition of Creative Corner over here on the Woodman29 channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Joy Toy Mold Color C figure. This is one of those figures that you can paint yourself, and I've gone ahead and laid the figure on the desk here. And I just wanted to show you just how modular this thing is, and because it didn't come with any instructions, I wanted to show you where all the joints went and how you actually assemble this thing. From his feet and ankles to his shins, his knees, his thighs, his waist, the T-bar right there that connects the upper waist together. This is his midsection, his chest. You can see his neck, the head, and if we look over here, you can see all the joints for the arms, which is the shoulder, his bicep, elbow, forearm, and those really tiny joints are for the hands. If we look over here, here's all his included accessories. He has an upper body chest armor, his pistol in a holster, a radio for his back, an extra pouch, a knife, a sheath, and a gun. And right here is a fully assembled figure, and I want to show you just what he looks like when he's all put together. And we're actually going to take a moment and show you where all these accessories go on the figure. There is very little glue involved. The first thing we're going to take a look at is his head up here, and I'll pull this out. And you'll notice this black port right there, and that peg actually goes into that hole in his upper body. So you want to dab a little glue in the bottom of that hole. His neck is articulated, and after that dries, you'll be able to pop his head right off. The next thing we're going to take a look at is his thigh armor. And you'll notice on this one, there's a square peg. And if we turn it to the side, you'll notice there's a square hole. Now that square hole is for his holster, and apparently he's a right-handed gentleman. And you'll notice the square peg on the back of the holster, so that needs to get glued in place. If we look at his left thigh, you have this extra pouch with a square hole in it, and that actually lines up to the square peg. And I'll show you right here, this just lines up like this, and you would glue that in place. So, the next thing we could take a look at is his knife. Now, there's no pegs on this, so you're able to glue this sheath anywhere on the figure that you'd like. So, that choice is yours. And lastly, is this radio, and you notice there's a hole in the back of this radio. And if I flip the figure around here on camera, on the back of his body armor, you'll see that there's a peg right there. And what this does is a little dab of glue right here, and you glue this in place, and that lines up right there. And again, the choice is yours. You absolutely do not have to use all these accessories. I just wanted to point this out to you because, again, Joy Toy didn't add any instructions on these figures. Let me lay him back down right here. And one of the questions I get asked is just what kind of glue do I use? You grab that, and here you can see I use the Loctite Super Glue. This is in the gel form. I really like using the gel form because it doesn't spill all over the place. It actually stays put wherever you put the dot. It also comes in this pen form. It's a little bit more precision work on this pen. It's the same exact stuff, except this pen is actually a little bit easier to handle. I found that this actually works fantastic when doing these small glue jobs. Some of the tools I'm going to use to paint this figure is right here. As you can see, I have a variety of tweezers. You can really never have enough tweezers. I have a couple of different types of brushes. You do want at least one fine tip brush to do all that detail work. There's nothing too fancy here, guys. And of course, a razor blade. Here's the fine tip brush. So these are a must when you're putting this figure together. The next thing we're going to take a look at is what kind of paint do I use. So as we pan over here, I'll show you that I actually use the Tamiya acrylic paint. Now I found that this particular paint works absolutely fantastic on all the figures that I do custom work on. Today we're going to be using the Deck Tan, the NATO Green, and the Red Brown. Now, be that this is acrylic paint, this is really easy cleanup. You can clean your brushes just with regular water. And I found that these actually adhere to the plastic perfectly. Now, the reason why I'm using these particular colors are, I'm going to actually take this team and create a fourth member. And I believe those colors match these colors pretty close. I really like this set, and I always wanted to add a fourth member to the team to make this three-man team a four-man squad. I also use different types of washes on each of my figures, and I'll grab one of those right now. Now, I only use these particular washes. This is from Game Color Wash. This is a black wash. The reason why I use these is because this is just what's available to me. I also have a flesh tone wash right here, which is used on bare skin and faces and such, and that actually takes that plastic looking look away from the figures and makes it more realistic. And the last color I primarily use is right here. Bring this into camera. This is a sepia shade. Now this is more of a brown or a rust color, and I find that I try to match the wash to the paint I'm actually using. So if I'm painting blue, I'll use a blue wash, and if I'm painting yellow, I'll use a yellow wash, and etc. And rather than just using a black wash on everything. Let me show you some of the other projects I've been working on. Right here are some soft good ghillie suits I've been messing around with, and I think I actually posted a picture of Snow Job last year in the snow. So this is one project I've been working on lately. The other projects I've been working on are, of course, you can see Superman photobombing back there. I'm in the middle of repairing a couple of 1983 G.I. Joes. There's a Quick Kick custom on a Marvel Universe body. And here's some of the other really intense customs I've been working on. I'll get the paint out of the way here to show you. First up is Raptor. I really didn't like the FSS version they released, so I created my own. He's got a Boss Fight Studios upper body and Marauder legs with some G.I. Joe parts. Next to him is Tracker. He's another obscure character from the G.I. Joe line. I really like how he came out. And the most obvious one right here is Rampart. He's completely painted from head to toe, and he's got a soft goods vest on underneath all that web gear. And I really like making these obscure characters to fill in all those missing holes in my G.I. Joe collection. Alright, without further ado, let's get back to the task on hand. See if we can go ahead and tackle this figure and see what he's going to look like. I want to take a moment and just show you how this figure goes together, and you absolutely want to heat these parts up with a blow dryer for about 30 seconds on low, because this is a really rigid plastic. And as you can see, I just heated this up and it popped in there no problem at all. It goes together real nicely and real easily. Now, without heat, you'll never get this thing put together. And with all these tiny parts, you absolutely want to take a few seconds, heat these things up, and avoid the frustration of breaking anything. Because unfortunately, they don't offer any spare parts with this set. Alright, after heating everything up, I actually put the large chunks together that I want to paint in this fashion. The arms, the legs, and of course the torso. One thing I did miss when we're talking about gluing is the actual knee pads. And you'll notice on these kneecaps, right there's a peg. And what you want to do is put a little dot of glue on that peg, and here's the knee pad. And as you'll notice on this knee pad, it has an upside down circle. And if I flip this over, you'll notice there's a square hole. And what you want to do is, after you apply the glue, you squeeze this onto the peg. It goes on rather tightly. And once that's applied, this is the actual configuration that the knee pad should be on the figure. It's really important to use very minimal glue, not to get anything on those moving parts. Otherwise, you'll restrict all this free movement of the legs. Just want to point that out to you folks, and I apologize that I missed that earlier on. I think we're going to go ahead and start with the legs first. And one thing I do want to point out is right here on the upper shin, there's an actual patch. I'm going to actually paint that a different color later on, so let's get painting. Now what I'm going to do is actually dry this upper part with the blow dryer for a little while so I can handle it. I'll be able to grab it here and finish painting the leg. I'm going to go ahead and set this aside and let it dry and move on to the next leg. And that's going to wrap up the first color of paint on the legs. I'll use the same trick for both the arms. I'll paint it, dry it, flip it around, and keep them going. One of the major problems with painting figures is paint rub on these moving joints, so what we might have to do is put on a first coat, let it dry, and put on a second coat. That way the paint rub is minimal. Let's move on to the second arm and get that one done too. Now, one obvious thing I want to point out while I'm painting these is anytime you're putting on a lighter color over a darker plastic, you'll notice that some of the gray is actually bleeding through. And that's really not much of a problem. You can either give it another coat, but because we're going to put a wash on this, it's going to actually look worn and give me the look I'm going for. With the arms aside, now let's work on the waist. Alright, that looks good enough. We'll put this aside and let it dry. Let's move on to the torso next and get this one done. And that's going to wrap up the deck tan color we're going to use on all the upper body pieces. With all the other pieces put aside and drying, we're going to go ahead and move on to the brown. Now at the beginning of the video, I said we were going to use this red-brown color. And the more I looked at the other figures I want to match, it looks like the flat earth is going to match better. It really doesn't matter which brown you use, but I'm going to go ahead and use the flat earth instead. We're going to paint all these armor bits and of course the top of the boots. And we'll go ahead and use the flat earth and see how it's going to come out. We'll start with the bottom and we'll go ahead and get both these boots done and paint it up. This is going to finish both the boots. We might have to touch up this moving joint later on. And we're going to move on to all the armor bits. This is the right side thigh armor that the holster glues to. And lastly is the left side thigh armor that the extra pouch glues to. That's going to wrap up all the armor bits. We'll go ahead and put these aside and let them dry. And as I pointed out earlier, if you notice on the shin right here is a molded patch. We're going to go ahead and paint that the same brown color while I have it out. And that's going to be the same for both the legs. So while this leg is dry, we'll go ahead and get this done. we go. I really like that contrast and the way it came out. Let's grab the next one. And voila! Yep, I really like how that breaks up the color of the legs. With both the legs completely dry, we're going to go ahead and apply the knee pad. And as I pointed out earlier, you can see the upside down circle. You take this square hole right here and you line it up to that peg. And let me grab some glue, and you really want to be careful not to glue this thing to your finger because these parts are really tiny, and of course, don't put too much glue to get in all those moving pieces either. So we'll grab this, flip this over. We'll line it up on camera here. Make sure I don't drop it. Push it on the post. We're going to go ahead and do the same for the other leg and let these dry, and we'll get these painted up. With both the knee pads on both the legs, this glue dries really quick, so we're going to go ahead and paint these knee pads the same color brown. Now you can opt to paint the back side of the knee pads, but I'm not going to bother because you won't really see it. Now we're going to move on to the body armor, and as you can see, there's all sorts of fantastic, really tiny details all over this thing. From the pouches and the straps to the grenades. We flip it around the back side, again, some more pouches and straps back here. Slung over the shoulder here is the actual cord that radio hooks up to. Comes down to the front right here, which is a CB type communicator. So we're going to take the base of this and paint it the NATO green. Because this thing is so detailed, it's going to take us a little while to get this done. So let's go ahead and jump in and get this thing rolling out. I went ahead and let this thing dry off camera, and what we're going to do is add some of the sky color to some of the pouches to add a little bit of contrast. And with that, we're done using the sky color. I think it looks pretty good. I think I'm going to take some of that brown we used on all the shin armor and paint some of these larger pouches to add a little more contrast as well. And with that, that's going to wrap up the brown color on the body armor. We'll go ahead and put this aside to dry, and we'll move on to the black to finish up all the details. And for the final color we're going to use to tie this all together is a flat black. We'll use this on the extra ammo clips here on the front, all the straps, the cord going over the shoulder, and all those grenades hanging off this vest. I have to tell you, I really didn't realize just how many clasps and straps there are on this thing until you have to paint them. Let's keep it going. I went ahead and fixed all my paint lines off camera, tightened everything up, made sure it looks nice and sharp because there is quite a bit of details on this thing. We'll go ahead and put this aside, and we'll move on to the head next and see if we can't get this figure wrapped up. Alright, now let's take a look at the head next. I went ahead and cut a Q-tip, and this is a great tip to hold these tiny parts. This way I can spin it around, and looking at this thing has just as much detail as that body armor we just did. We'll have to take our time, see if we can't utilize the same colors to tie everything together, and see if we can't make him a fourth member of that team. Let me get the paint going here, and let's get this done. I went ahead and dried the deck tan color. What we're going to do is grab the brown, bring that in on camera, and see if we can add some more highlights all over this fantastic looking helmet. That's going to wrap up the brown. As you can see, I got a little sloppy on this. It's a little difficult to reach over the camera and get this done. I'm going to dry this off camera, touch it up, and we'll move on to the next color. With both those browns touched up and dried, we're going to move on to the black next. just like the previous colors, I went ahead and dried this off camera. And there is some touch-ups I still need to do. We're going to go ahead and move on to the visor next, and with that I'm going to use a flat red color. And with that, I think that's going to wrap up the red. I will admit, you really need to have some steady hands when doing these tiny parts. What I'll do is, I'll set this aside and let it dry, finish all the touch-ups. Let's move on to the gun next. Now, just like the figure, there's an awful lot of detail on his rifle here. I looked at the other teammates I'm trying to match, and their guns just have the body of the gun painted brown. We're not going to do any of the attachments, we're not going to do the stock or the grips. So let me grab the brown that we've used and we'll see what we come up with. I think just doing the body of the gun really brings out all the other attachments. We'll go ahead and put this aside to dry, and I think we're going to start assembling the figure next. Alright, with all these parts 100% completely dried and all the touch-ups done, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next step of getting this figure finished up. The next step is going to be adding the actual wash. Now some people don't like to use a wash, and that's perfectly fine. You can actually leave the figure in just like this, nice and clean looking. But what I find is when I use the wash, it actually brings out all the fantastic detail on this figure. It really makes him pop. Now the wash I'm going to use, and we looked at this earlier, is the actual sepia color. Because this is a brown tone or a rust tone, I'm going to use that on this tan body. And actually I'm going to use it on all these parts. Now what I'll do is grab one of the teammates I'm trying to match. And let me grab my paintbrush here, and here you can see all the actual details that pop when you use just enough wash. You can see all the stitching, all the wrinkles, all the way down the leg here. And add some depth and shadow to the figure. So I'm going to take this figure and try to bring it up to this standard. Now when you're using a wash, you really got to be careful. If you add too much and let it dry too quick, you'll lose all this fantastic detail. That's not what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to use just enough to bring out all these details and make him match his team. Go ahead and start with the upper body first. Now, these are the tricks that I use to apply a wash, so go ahead and do it the way you want to, but this is how I'm going to do it. What you need to do is apply just enough wash for it to settle in all these low parts of the body and all the sculpting. And I actually work in small sections of the figure so nothing dries too quickly. I'm going to take a nice dry cloth or paper towel, give it a nice dab, and I'm going to keep dabbing it until I get the look that I'm looking for. And here you can see, just that alone really brings out the stitching and all the depth of the wrinkles on the figure. I'm going to go ahead and apply this in small sections at a time so this figure doesn't get ahead of me. We'll go ahead and load up the brush here and see what it looks like. another example of what it looks like just adding the wash. I'm going to go ahead and keep moving on and try to get the look I'm going for to match the team. So far, so good. I'm going to go ahead and put all these parts aside and see if we can't get the rest of the parts completed. And with that, now you can really see all those wrinkles and stitches, as well as the details on his belt. Move on to the body armor next and see if we can't bring out all these fantastic looking details. I went ahead and added just a little bit more wash to the body armor just because it has a lot of depth to it. And I think by doing that, it's really going to make this thing jump out at you and look dirty and worn. I'm going to apply the same wash to all the leg armor. And even something as simple as this leg armor that doesn't have a ton of detail, let's compare the two. If you use just enough wash, you can actually bring out detail on something simple like this. We'll put these aside. I'll get all the other armor done off camera, and I think we'll move on to the head next. And last but certainly not least, the final piece, the head. With that, all my painting is done. We'll go ahead and put all these parts aside and let them dry thoroughly and see if we can't get the figure finished. Here's one final look of what the figure looks like assembled without any of the body armor on, unpainted. And here we have the finished product. I went ahead and disassembled all the pieces to the figure and used a tester's matte finish on all the pieces, let them dry thoroughly of course before I reassembled him. I generally use the matte color because I don't like high gloss on any of my figures. And as you can see, by using just enough wash, it makes all those fantastic details pop. I do unfortunately have a little bit of paint rub on all the moving parts, but what I'm going to do is create another video and show you how I was able to rectify that. Here's a quick look at what the figure looks like with all his armor on unpainted. And here's what he looks like with all his body armor on. I also went ahead and used a water slide decal of the American flag and put it on his left bicep. That ties him into his other teammates. And again, as you can see, by using just enough wash, it really brings out the entire sculpt and all the wrinkles and all the different textures that this character has. Well, as you can see, this 3-man Delta team just turned into a 4-man squad. I think we did a pretty decent job matching the paint. And if you ask me, he blends in pretty well. I really enjoyed this project, and if at the very least, I hope you folks took away some tips to apply to your own custom needs. I don't claim to know it all, but I really do enjoy sharing the things that I've learned and utilized over the years to create the characters that I just don't have in my collection. If you have any tips of your own and have a thought, leave it in the comment spot below. I'd really love to hear from you. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to watch my video, and of course, if you like what you see, go ahead and join the community. I'm going to share a link right now of the previous figure I did. Feel free to watch that, and also the Delta Force figures that were featured in this video. And most importantly, help a fellow collector out and share your knowledge.